the life of Napoleon II, honestly like one of the most interesting lives in my opinion. Not a lot happened, but at the same time a lot happened too. He might have died young, but there's still like so many myths about him, and there's still so many stories about him that for some reason I just keep on returning to the subject. I think I made a YouTube video about him like 2 years ago, and till this day I'm still just fascinated by his story. There's a tragedy in it, but there's also this sense of joyfulness in it, as he did eventually become one kind of with his father in a sense, and not necessarily achievement wise, but he did become one in mindset wise, and this feeling of having to achieve your destiny. You can tell he was definitely the son of Napoleon himself. And I wanted to make this video because, I mean, honestly, I haven't been posting a lot. Honestly, I've just been busy building my business, Nasir Media, and this channel has basically been dying. And it's sad because I read a lot. Like, I read a shit ton of biographies and history and all that. And all that information is basically just going here, but nowhere else. So I thought it could be interesting, maybe these sit-down videos with literally no script, nothing. All of the information just comes from here, and I'll just yap about what I learned. And what I recently learned is more about Napoleon II, because I just read a book written by a Dutch author. I looked for a translation, but sadly there isn't one. But if anyone here is Dutch, I'll link it in the description. The book really goes into detail into more of the psychological feelings of Napoleon II, you could say. His fucking bugs. Sorry, I'm in the mountains of Portugal, so there are bugs everywhere and birds. But his unfulfilled destiny. And it's the same what Napoleon actually said in a quote, right? He said, what was it again? Like, achieving my destiny, that's like my main doctrine, something like that, something along those lines. And that is literally the feeling that Napoleon II had too. So, first, let's get into like, oh, there's a bug on the camera. You know what? We're gonna keep him there. Hope he doesn't. Oh, yeah, there he goes. So it all started off with Napoleon II being born. Well, actually, no. The story starts earlier. The story starts when Napoleon has an issue. He needs a male heir. And he's currently married with Josephine. And Josephine is not able to bear many children. So, as things goes back in those days, he get a new wife. And the new wife is called Marie Louise, and Marie Louise is also the the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. So it's a great combination. It's a great deal. You get first of all an alliance with Austria, but you also get a new wife that can bear you a child, and she's quite young. She's around 18, 19, if I can remember correctly. So they marry, they get a child. That is Napoleon II, the King of Rome. That was his first title. And Napoleon II was raised as a king, obviously, and as a French prince, and he got all the benefits of it. He had like a team of like 20 people taking care of him 24/7. Think of security, um, people that would change his diapers, I don't know, women that would feed him, women that would help him fall asleep. All those jobs, like he had like a whole entourage just being with him 24/7. And eventually, I think he was around 6 years old, Napoleon loses his crown. He actually does abdicate in favor of his son, and officially he was emperor for like maybe a day or something like that. So that's why we call him Napoleon II. Napoleon II never really experienced it because he was like 6 years old, so he never got any of the benefits of becoming emperor. Eventually, the Austrians, they joined the coalition against France, and this means that Marie Louise, her dad, is basically fighting her husband. So Napoleon loses, I'll cut you the chase, and Austria kind of kidnaps Napoleon II and Marie Louise and brings them back to safety, in a sense, in Austria. And there are two things that happen here that are important. first of all, Napoleon II, now after basically being raised in one of the most important, like those are your one of the most important ages, like 0 to 6 or whatever. He gets raised as a French prince, and now suddenly that switches. So he has his whole entourage of French ladies helping him. Eventually, two of them they come to Austria, and one of them actually has a fascinating story, as she is an aristocrat, and she basically gave up her whole life. She doesn't have a husband nor a kid, and her whole life goal is taking care of Napoleon II. That's all she does. And well, sadly for her, she gets kicked out. She gets sent back to France, and that is because the grandpa of Napoleon II is the Emperor of Austria, and he wants his grandchild to be raised like an Austrian prince from now on. So from now on, he only wants him to interact with Austrian people. So his entourage gets switched up, and he gets an Austrian one. And another thing that's important that happens now is that Marie Louise doesn't follow Napoleon into exile. She stays in Austria and eventually goes to Italy, where she gets like a plot of land and she becomes Duchess of like Tuscany or something like that. And um, she doesn't join him, which a lot of people and mostly Bonapartists are very against. As a wife, you're supposed to serve your husband and stand beside him, especially in the hard times. And she didn't do that, and that is logical in a sense, as I mean, Saint Helena nor Elba was not necessarily like a most luxury life of living, and she is the Austrian princess, so she's been raised in wealth, and all she's known is a golden spoon. So for her to live in Saint Helena is probably even more uncomfortable than for many. And she stays in Austria and then eventually Italy. But we'll get back to that story in a bit, because that's actually going to get interesting too, because there's a bit of betrayal that's about to happen. But first, let's get into the education of the Napoleon II. So Napoleon II, first of all, we can't be calling him Napoleon II in Austria, as then he's reminded that he's the son of Napoleon, and they want to erase that memory. So his new name is Franz, and Franz also becomes the Duke of Reichstadt. Nothing as glamorous as being the King of Rome, sadly, but yeah, his new name is Franz. And he gets teachers eventually as he gets to the age of having to start education, and he learns Austrian, German, obviously, and he learns a lot about history. And his history teacher is actually quite fascinating because he actually gave the honest truth. He wasn't as biased as the other teachers that he'll get. He'll tell him about that his dad made tons of mistakes, but he'll also tell him about how great his dad was in a sense of tactical maneuvers and battlefield knowledge, and honestly just a genius. He tells him all of that, and that's kind of where like the whole adoring your father starts. But at the same time, he isn't necessarily able to adore his father completely yet, because no one gives him any information about his dad. No one wants to tell him about his dad, like what happened to his dad. It isn't even clear like when Napoleon II found out when Napoleon, his dad, died. Like that isn't clear in the sources. It could have been that maybe he didn't find out for like another year. So that's very sad. And then there's also this other dude, and he is the head teacher of Napoleon II. And he's this philosopher type, and he's like very, very strict. And he basically tells Napoleon II through his whole childhood that he's stupid. And if Napoleon II isn't able to give him the right answer for a certain question, he just tells him he's stupid again. And this obviously isn't good for the confidence of such a young prince. So to get back to his mom, the relationship with his mom was quite weird. It all starts off actually when he was born, basically. So Marie Louise was probably around 18, 19 when he was born, and she nearly died while giving birth to Napoleon II. There's a story and it goes something along the lines of like eventually he was born and he was like left on the floor, and everyone just focused, even the doctors and Napoleon himself, like focused on uh, Marie Louise, making sure she was okay. And apparently one of the ladies found Napoleon II on the floor. Not sure how true this story is, obviously, but that already shows like, okay, we're off on a rocky start. And then it goes through the years. Through the years, it doesn't necessarily improve. Marie Louise is never able to really get a bond with her child. We must remember she is basically still a child when she births Napoleon II, but still, she doesn't want to cuddle him. She doesn't want to be around him when he cries. She doesn't want to comfort him. She doesn't want to feed him. None of that. She actually wants to spend as less time as possible with Napoleon II. She just isn't able to be a mother figure for him. And this is sad, obviously, as every son needs a mother. And this eventually goes on even when he's older. So, as I said, she was still married to Napoleon officially, but she does get a new boyfriend and they even secretly marry in Italy. And he is an officer who even becomes close to Napoleon II, even though Napoleon II lives in Austria, but like on trips or whatever, they'll see each other, they'll talk about warfare, as that is like the biggest interest of Napoleon II. And she basically cheats on Napoleon, and she births two children. And it isn't until later that he does the calculations. Like, hey, wait, my dad died in Saint Helena at this age, in this year, and my stepbrothers, wait, aren't they like this age? Wait, this doesn't make sense. This means that my mom um, cheated on my dad. And then, as if that punch wasn't enough, another punch is that, wait, she cheated with a person I look up to, a person who I thought was a friend of mine, this officer. So in his life, you'll see that he feels betrayed multiple times in life, even by his granddad. His granddad, he was one of the favorite grandchildren, Napoleon II. But it isn't until there's this other grandchild that gets born, who becomes the heir or the future heir of Austria, of the Austrian throne, and suddenly he gets all the attention. So there's a lot of betrayal going on in his life, and it's very sad to see. Now, there is a plot twist, because there is actually one person who is nice towards Napoleon, and his name is Anton. And Anton is a fascinating character, as Anton actually wrote a memoir, so he gives a lot of the information about what Napoleon II was like. And he tells a story of how Napoleon II was an absolute genius in the knowledge of warfare. And he writes down in his memoir that he's just so surprised about how much Napoleon II knows about generals, about historical figures, historical battles. And there's even this instance where Napoleon II tells Anton, like, oh yeah, I read your papers on Waterloo. I even translated them to French and I translated them to Italian, just so I'm sure that I know all the details, that I know all of the details about the Waterloo battle and I truly understand it. Do you understand that level of dedication? Like, you've got this whole basically book that Anton wrote about Waterloo, the battle where Napoleon II's dad lost his empire, you could say, and he translates it to Italian and translates it to French. I mean, that just shows how dedicated and how fascinated he is towards the subject of warfare. So this goes on, this friendship between Anton and Napoleon. Anton truly inspires him in a sense, and shows him that, there's a possibility that you're more than just a political inconvenience, you could say. I mean, in the book, the author describes it perfectly, as in, like, yeah, Napoleon II was living in wealth, but he was basically a prisoner in a palace. And although for most people, and probably a couple of you watching, this doesn't sound as too bad, but for someone who has this ambition and this feeling of having to fulfill the destiny of his dad, maybe, and stabilize the empire that his dad built, as Napoleon was never able to truly stabilize the French Empire. And he has that feeling, and then he's stuck into a palace. So suddenly it's not necessarily such a great feeling living in such luxury when there's such a big lock on the door. And Anton shows him like, yeah, so the Greek people are looking for a new king. There are also talks about in South America, there are a couple countries that are independent from Spain now, and they're looking for a French prince to rule them, as they wanted to fight against the British, something along those lines. So they didn't want to, so they wanted a French aristocrat to run their country. And there were also talks, which is fascinating, that Napoleon II, that Napoleon II became the king of Poland. And the Polish people, they love Napoleon, as Napoleon mostly showed great generosity towards the Polish people, and they remembered and they loved Napoleon II. And while the Polish were having a revolution, they actually were looking for Napoleon II. Sadly, that never happened, but that would have been crazy if that actually happened. So yeah, Anton really gives Napoleon a sense of hope and a sense of, oh, maybe this is actually possible. But there's still this one thing holding him back, and that is, well, actually two things. First of all, his family. He is an inconvenience, as I mentioned earlier, and yeah, they don't want him to die because they do love him as he is a family member. But there is a sad quote of when he did die that his grandfather said that it's actually better that he died, as he would have been an inconvenience for everyone, and he could have also been used um, as this piece on a chessboard for the Europeans to just use, and he didn't want his grandchild to be used by all these different countries and empires. So there's also the second thing, and that is that his illness. He has tuberculosis. He can't do anything for too long, too much effort, and he gets sick. So, for instance, when he goes horse riding or when he does speeches, he gets sick and tired, and is just coughing up blood and puking and not able to walk and just utterly tired. So he can't do anything with that, and he knows that is like one of the things that God jinxed him, and he might never be able to fulfill his destiny because of that thing. One of the things that is also interesting to know about his military and speeches and stuff is that most of the Austrian princes, you get like a regiment, and you're from the start you're basically nearly on top of the ladder already. Napoleon didn't get that. Napoleon II didn't get that. He started as captain, and when people asked him like, don't you feel annoyed that like all your cousins and stuff, like they get all the good positions and you get this? And it's like, no, no, like this is perfect for me. Like this is how I learn. This is how I become one with the soldiers. This is how I climb to the top of the ladder by myself, and I don't get it all handed over to me. Just like my dad. My dad did it himself too. He really looks up to his dad, and he really eventually studies the career of his dad vividly. As I don't know why they would do this, but they actually gave him free access to the Austrian library, so he was able to read a lot of French history and read a lot about his dad. Um, One of the things that's also quite fascinating, and it's not normal back in the day, is that he loved talking to the regular people, the regular folks, the regular soldiers. And there is this instance where he actually gets into a heated argument with one of the officers, with the officers, with his head teacher, because there was this aristocratic officer, and there were also these regular officers and these regular soldiers. And instead of talking to the aristocratic officer, which would be the normal way to handle things and would be the respectful way to handle things, he actually ignored that officer and just started talking to the regular soldiers. and his head teacher got angry at him, like saying you have to only talk to the aristocratic officer and don't talk to the regular folks. But I think he really got inspired by his dad, as his dad used to do the same. His dad used to talk to tons of soldiers before battles and go lower into the ranks and try to become one with those people too and show them that you really care about them. So he really got inspired by his dad and he put that to practice, all the things he learned. One of the saddest things to me with the story, because he died when he was like 21, is the fact that he was never able to fulfill his destiny. And that he had this burning desire, this crazy ambition. And he knew he wanted this. He couldn't stop reading about Julius Caesar. He couldn't stop reading about Alexander the Great. Literally like his dad. But his ending, sadly, was just a footnote in history, and he says that himself. He says that himself, I think it was like a letter, like, I'm just a footnote in history, I'll be forgotten. And he is actually forgotten. It isn't until like 1940 that Hitler, I know, unexpected name, but Hitler brings back the body of Napoleon II from Austria to France. And he doesn't get buried until like wasn't it like the 1980s or something like that? Like very late. And he gets buried by, I think, next to his dad. What I love thinking about is alternative history. So what if? Like what if he was able to escape and become the king of Poland and eventually push that through Europe? Or maybe just become the king of Poland and builds a dynasty there, and then till this day we'll have a Bonaparte dynasty in Poland. Wouldn't that just be fascinating? The same, I think, like when Napoleon kidnapped the Pope. What if the Pope died under the custody of Napoleon? Would we have two popes right now? As Napoleon would have picked another pope and the Vatican would have picked another pope too. Would we till this day have two popes then? Those are all fascinating questions and we'll never have the answer. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you would like more of these, I read a lot and mostly I don't use or share my information anywhere. I know these videos aren't well structured, but they are kind of like just sit down videos and just me yapping about history. Back in the day, I used to do a lot of interviews with historians. I could maybe bring that back, but it does cost a lot of time. And you're often dependent on the historian. If the historian isn't good at sharing their story, then the whole video is fucked. So yeah, would you guys want more of this? I'm currently reading this one. It's called Hero of the Empire. It's about Churchill's youth. Napoleon II, he was also born into a family where his dad achieved greatness, and then Churchill was born into a family where his grandfather achieved greatness, and they both feel like they need to fill those shoes. And Churchill eventually succeeds, and Napoleon doesn't. So those are two very interesting stories, one with a happy ending and one with a sad ending. So if you want me to make a video about that, like this video, and then yeah, thank you for watching.